All right, I guess our countdown timer's lagging
That's where
today.
one day we're going to have to fix this thing for real because it
Yeah,
confuses me every single time.
I wasn't sure if we're gonna make it.
it
I
was
was
like, countdown.
I literally just opened a terminal and was like, "Can I ping the internet? Like, is it me? Like, what's going on here?" And
Oh
it's always
man,
like that 30-second kind of timer. It's like 31, 32. So I don't know. Feature
kind of hangs out there, right? Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
feature.
makes you pay attention, I guess, right?
Exactly.
All right, we got the whole group here. Got some interesting things to talk about today. So yeah. So Brian, what do you got for us today?
Well, I was definitely wanting to follow back up on SolarWinds. I know there's more stuff that's come out with this new Raindrop and
Hmm.
more people that are impacted by it. So I don't know, Sammy, do you have some more details behind Raindrop and some of the interesting things that have popped up with it?
Yeah, I can kind of give like the high level rundown. So basically, Symantec uncovered a piece of malware, or an additional piece of malware, I should say, that was used in the SolarWinds attack. It was used against a large number of victims, and so this new piece of malware is called, or dubbed, Raindrop. And we were just joking actually about who names these things. So I thought that was pretty clever. But nonetheless, Raindrop, not to be confused with Teardrop, is a loader which delivers a payload of Cobalt Strike. Um, and so, interestingly enough, while Teardrop was delivered by the initial Sunburst backdoor, Raindrop appears to have been used for spreading across the victims' networks. So it appeared elsewhere on the network and doesn't seem to be a part of that initial compromise, but is still part of the attack chain.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
interesting, right? So I think now if you kind of look at the, what we're uncovering, you can see we have 4 pieces of malware so far. My guess is we're going to have more and more as things kind of get encoded here. And I was just reading some stats about it, and it looks like from a timing perspective, first loader was done, basically next day after the code was installed, and then Raindrop appeared about 7 to 10 days or so later in the host. So this kind of comes back to what we were saying in the last couple of shows, where this is really just a entry point into the network, right? And once you're in, you have a lot more opportunity to then install new loaders, look at ways in and out of the network, kind of grow your foothold, so to speak, and work around all these back doors. So it just shows really the whole in depth and advanced severity of this type of supply chain attack going on.
Yeah, no, it's very true, and it just speaks to the level of sophistication of this attack in particular. And it's just part of the whole, like you mentioned, for the pieces of malware between the Sunspot, I think it's Sunburst, Teardrop, and now Raindrop. Yeah, you can see that there was a lot of, I guess, forethought put into this attack before it was actually executed.
Definitely. And I know Malwarebytes said that they had some type of an attack that was similar from that same group of people. So I think, as we've talked about, we're just going to continue to see more and more stuff unfold from all of this. One of the interesting things that I read the other day is that in the proposed new budget for the United States here is that they're looking at adding $9 billion in funding to CISA and different federal agencies, and that's huge. That's almost
Mm-hmm.
the statistic I read was 3,700% increase in cybersecurity funding. And I think without this SolarWinds attack, you wouldn't see that type of funding come to that level. I think it's just
Yeah.
amazing when all of a sudden it's in your back door, and then it gets people's
Yeah.
attention that they need to support that. So yeah, that'll be great to see a lot more support and funding and things coming out of all of that as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we see, in the private enterprise, right? I mean, sometimes you have to have this, compelling event, whether it's a DR scenario, a breach, a hack, to kind of get people to like, oh wow, like I gotta look at this seriously. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here now from, a true supply chain attack in the federal side of, hey, this is a major issue. A lot of federal governments and entities are targeted on this. Still more to come, I'm sure. Okay, now we got to take this stuff very seriously, and we kind of always say that cybersecurity is not going to go anywhere, and it's really not, right? I mean, I think in 2021, we're still going to see a lot of sophisticated attacks across government, enterprise, and businesses of all shapes and sizes, and attacks of all types, right? So I think the fact that they're kind of taking this thing very seriously, and whether it's election or this or that, I don't want to get political on things, but I think taking security and cybersecurity is very important, from a country standpoint as well, right?
Yeah. I think it kind of pushes. Hopefully, that'll push us away from more of a reactive state, and people will start investing more time into doing more proactive activities like actual threat hunting and investing in their security hygiene as a priority, as opposed to something they do after a compromise. And to that point, I'm curious to see how that'll affect the federal networks, and if they're going to get specialized trainings, and there will be just to see what kind of growth essentially will come out of $900 million, right, in funding it was to all those areas. So and then on a national level, that speaks a lot to just our national security, and hopefully moving forward in the future it'll be a much safer place. But I know the work's never done.
Exactly. So I know a common question that we keep getting is, how do I know I'm safe from all these things, right? I may have had SolarWinds, or I don't know if I had the impacted version at some point in time, or I did, or I'm just, all these other companies starting to get attacked. Maybe I was attacked and it just hasn't come out yet, if you will, right? So I know that, for example, FireEye has a tool out to help audit. CISA's released a tool up on their GitHub. CrowdStrike, mixed my words there, has a tool out now. So making sure that if you do download these tools, make sure that they are the signed tools from the authenticative sources, right? Because there's also an opportunity for an attack against these tools to help check all that. So just make sure that you check the hashes on those, and that it's the legitimate source that you download those tools to run from. And then companies like Triden Group, we can help you come in and run those assessment tools and verify that nothing has been compromised in your environment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Rise. There's definitely kind of more tooling out there to kind of do these, like quick assessments, so to speak, of looking for real specific, portions of code, or am I running certain versions or software? But at the end of the day, you still need to kind of do a true deeper analysis, or penetration test or assessment of some kind to really look at, okay, do I have just general best practices in place? Are my defenses really up? Versus just relying on a simple tool to kind of look at certain points of the network, right? So still want to look at the network holistically, the users, the people, points of entry, looking for any things that were maybe lateral movement or account creation or account escalations. Things like that are still very important to do and perform, on top of using these these tools and things like that.
So Derek, you teed me up. It's all about the basics. I had to say it again. I'm never going to get away from that.
It's true, though. I mean, it's, sometimes it's the simplest things make the biggest difference, right? I mean, don't know how else to say it sometimes.
So I know off camera here, you had teased us with a story that you might be able to tell.
I did, actually. It was an interesting story around physical security. I think that one kind of maybe doesn't get top of mind so much anymore. And
it's a fun one.
With all these things locked in the cloud, and like no one going to an office anymore, people are kind of stuck in their houses. So recently we were doing a audit for a customer, down here. So we were visiting their local data center, and just taking inventory and kind of pictures for some future upgrades we got going. And this customer has several cabinets in this colo, and I couldn't remember exactly what cages were theirs, but every cabinet has fingerprint codes. So I kind of knew about where they were. So the first row I remembered pretty clearly, and was able to open up those cabinets in question, and everything was good. These were the customer's gear. Naming convention was good, and I'd seen it before, so we were all okay. And then in another part of the data center, I couldn't remember which racks were theirs, but I knew it was like one of the two, right? So I kind of knew which one. I thought, okay, well, my fingerprint is only going to work on one of them. So whichever one I can open, that's the one, right? So I go to the first one, opens and buzzes, and I open it, and I thought, okay, it must be this one. And I'm looking at it and just, kind of surveying it, and, it just didn't really seem right. I'm like, well, this doesn't really kind of match the customer's type of gear, and like where all these things come from, and it wasn't making sense. So then I kind of went back and I actually called the customer and said, hey, can you confirm what numbers you guys have? And they said, oh, it's these two. And then I was like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. And then I went to the other one, and that one opened as well. So what happened is they had a couple, and they had actually sold a few, or kind of got out of, right? But from the colo perspective, they never took the old employees off of the cabinet. So every employee still had access to the cabinet that they resold. And basically now this was a totally different company's, assets. And I was able to kind of figure out, who it was, and kind of said, hey, like you guys need to really, check this kind of thing. So it was a pretty little scary thing just to kind of see that, hey, even though it's a colo and it's, highly protected and secured, you can get in there. But the fact that, someone could have physical access to your gear, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, if you have physical access, like you can pretty much do whatever you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very kind of like, whoa, like this is kind of nuts. And they handled it very well. And we just said, hey, you definitely kind of check the logs and check our access, and then vice versa. We wanted to make sure that no one else had access to our customers' gear as well. So it was kind of just like this, whoa, kind of just shocked me going, because it was really confusing. Because I'm like, okay, well, this gear doesn't make sense, and like, how is it connected? And then, yeah, sure enough, there's a different customer altogether. So, yeah,
you could have just stuck one of these in there.
Yeah, I mean,
console
console
access
access
everything, and then
the switch, the router. I mean, offload data. I mean,
just steal the whole thing itself. I mean, that's the hilarious part, is that, and I feel physical security is like one of those things that's so often overlooked. But I mean, it doesn't matter what firewalls or IDSs or crypto or security controls that you have, if you just can walk in and steal the asset itself. So, and I can't tell you how many times on engagements I would just basically walk up to whoever the customer service representative or the front desk person was, the receptionist, and just say, hey, I'm so and so from networking, and they would just, can I see your data, your data closet, and they take me right to it. It's without verification, without ID, and even with a couple, if I were to take a couple extra steps and gather some of this information through OSINT and maybe find out who they worked with and even make my position even more convincing, there would be, with the level of scrutiny I've seen with some organizations, it wouldn't have mattered. You would have been able to get into the steal all their assets. So physical security is often overlooked, but is kind of the core of where everything comes from, really, in the security world.
When we had a physical security pen test done at a previous company, they scoped it out. They waited until the temporary person was watching the front desk. They showed up in their Coca-Cola outfit. So they had a sense of urgency, they had authority, and they got right on through, no problem, up to the lunchroom, which was on a second floor. And then from there, data center, easy access, right? They just tagged right in behind somebody else. They stuck the little door jam thing in the door, kept the door open for them. They got in, and they could get anything they wanted to on the network.
Oh, yeah.
From that point. So it just comes back, again, to the basics. Like, trust but verify is always a big one. Like, just because you signed a contract at the data center, did you ask that hard question? Did you reset those keys or whatever? Like, I hate to say sometimes those physical combo locks may even be better, because you'll get them on video that they were sitting there trying to break into my lock.
Right.
Sometimes. And, fingerprints, we know you can lift those as well pretty easy.
Just simple tailgating too, right? You can, it gets you pretty far. And not to mention, I think this really, a lot of it boils down to security awareness training, because at the end of the day, if everybody's conscious and aware of some of these strategies, you'll notice them when it's happening to you. And then, for example, I think this is a big one that's often overlooked: your vendor ecosystem, your contractor ecosystem. Because one of the ways I've been able to get in through a lot of organizations is through contracted janitorial services who don't get the same kind of security awareness training that you would get as a regular employee, and therefore they won't follow standard protocols. And so when I ask, hey, my badge isn't working, could you scan me in? More than happy to do so, right? And so that applies both from a physical perspective, but also from a non-physical perspective. Like, how secure are the people that you work with? What is your vendor ecosystem like? Are they compliant? These are things you should be asking. So it's not just taking a look at your own exposure, but the exposure of the people you're working with.
Yeah, it's so
speaking of
easy. Oh, go ahead, Derek.
So I think a lot of those situations too, like confidence is key, right? I mean, like to your point, Sammy, you get into these scenarios where, if you act confident enough and like act like you should belong there or you work there, 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to let you in or like not really question it, right? It's when you kind of start to get nervous or look out of place. That's when you kind of start drawing attention. So, I mean, it's a really interesting kind of social experiment too. It's not so much about just, physically breaking into something, but how do you kind of exploit and social engineer your way into these situations and places you maybe shouldn't be or shouldn't have access to. And it's a pretty interesting kind of human element to to kind of add to these things as well.
Definitely. I know the other day I had my Amazon password when I logged in. It asked me to reset it. I'm like, that's a little weird. Like, why would it do that? So I close out the browser, go into incognito mode, and then try to log in again, and got the same thing. So I'm like, okay, well, I think this is a little more legit or whatever. But then you think about the two-factor piece, and like, somebody goes in and tries to reset your password, you get the two-factor, you just click OK, whatever. Like, we know to look for that, but as an end user that's not there every day, and they get trained to go do the two-factor, they may just click accept even though they didn't go put their password in. Right. And so that just makes you think a little bit more about the training. Like, hey, they got trained that they needed to use this two-factor tool. They got to click accept or OK on their phone, but they're just so used to doing it that they don't even think. So then what's the value of having MFA at that point? So that was something interesting. Yeah, that I heard the other day.
Like they might think, oh, like maybe, my app, like let's just say Facebook, for example, like it logged me out every 30 days. Yeah, it's been about 30 days. Sure, here's my password, hit OK, and like they don't question it twice. So I think to your point, there's a lot of, training that still needs to be done and things like that. But definitely.
It's like, what's Sammy doing on my machine today? It's like, well, he doesn't have time to worry about me.
Yeah, or does he? Right.
Who knows? Going after the big fish, but you are the big fish, Brian. Now that I think about it.
Uh-oh, you were saving that again for today, right? At the last 5 minutes, you would announce the results that I failed my pen test.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, so anyways, good stuff coming out from all of that. It'll be interesting again to see like maybe more tools, like with CISA releasing that one tool already. Will this funding bring more tools to being able to detect and look at your environment and see what else is out there going on and to keep an eye on it? And then the whole cloud factor, it's something different, right? It's new. People are starting to finally come up to speed on it and the maturity model because they're, data centers and on-premise, they got that dialed in. Then somebody went and sold their credit card and got the cloud started, and now they finally come back and get all the legal paperwork dialed in on the cloud, and now it's like getting those formal processes in place with all that between Azure, AWS, and GCP as the main providers. And SaaS is another big one, just being able to go sign up a new system and put data in there. I can just think of how many CRM systems have popped up in the last year or two, and it's more than dozens of them, right? You probably have hundreds of CRM platforms out there that you have put all your personal confidential data in that you don't want your competition to know. So changing that whole mindset to do that assessment up in the cloud.
Yeah, a lot of that comes down to really understanding your cloud stack and really back to asset management, right? Like, what do you understand what the certain services that are being used in your environment and what are testable, and if so, are you testing them? If not, you should be speaking to a third party or an expert that can do so, right? Because each ecosystem is quite large in the services that they provide and kind of require their own nuance and own type of testing. Right, like I'm not going to test AWS the same way I test Azure, and so I think that gets lost upon a lot of security programs because everybody's focused on the network and the assets in the cloud. Sure, the assets in the cloud are important. I don't deny that, but what about the cloud infrastructure itself? What about your Amazon RDS, your CloudFront, Aurora, your NAT gateways? Like, are those all secured? That's again, that all gets lost. And to your point, Brian, I think it's moving into the future. Not only as we migrate to the cloud, we got to cloud, we got to be testing the cloud, regularly for those exposures.
Exactly. I got something cool here to share. I'm gonna get in trouble with our marketing department, but
Uh-oh.
this just dropped in while we were talking, so I gotta share it.
All right, let's do
How
it.
about that?
Oh, all right.
Ooh,
We have
A
a
new
logo.
logo for the show. How about that?
there you
I
go.
like it. Good job, marketing.
So I thought I would just throw it out that we test it live and get some
You dropped
feedback.
it live too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like
they
that.
wanted to know if I liked it or not. So I said, well, we'll test it out with everybody.
Yeah, good job. I like it a lot. That's awesome. Yeah, I
Looks
think
great.
one other thing, just you kind of mentioned about SaaS providers really kind of popping up now, and I think with everything going on, that more people are going to be kind of inclined to maybe read these kind of contracts deeper. Like, hey, I'm giving you access to my data, whatever data that might be. Who owns it? What can you do with it? What happens if you guys get breached? Who's responsible for it? So I think people now are kind of looking at more of that kind of governance and compliance side of things. Like how are my partners or third parties or providers, handling my data as well. So it's going to be very interesting.
Yep. I know it's political, so I don't really want to go too deep into it or whatever, but I mean, that's another reason to back your data up out of the cloud. Because what happens if you don't pay your bill or you get terminated or whatever the case is, then your service is shut down. So if you don't have a way to recover back from that, I just think it's something so critical that people don't consider, if you will, right? So it's just one more thing that you need to look at when you look at all those agreements is understand what all that means, and then how do you maintain your ownership of your data, if you will.
Yeah, I think that can be a whole topic around just data, meaning like your personal data, meaning like you, me, or like your company's data. I think a lot of people now I've heard some kind of rumblings of some new privacy policies for these certain social media applications and where things are going with that. That people are kind of really inclined to like, hey, what is this company really doing with like my data, right? It's interesting.
Exactly. Well, thank you guys for jumping on today for another episode here
Yeah,
of our TG Secure Show. See if I can get the name right this time.
that's right. With the logo and everything now.
We'll throw up our little logo one more time. Why not, right?
Love
Feel
it.
pretty
Measure.
official now. On our way to top 10 Spotify.
That's right. All right. Well, take care out
Thanks,
there, and we'll
everybody.
see you next time.
Yep. See you next time.